Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to the Telehead Audiobook channel, where stories come to life through the magic of sound. I am your host, Telehead, and I'm here to guide you through a world of imagination. Hawthorne crossed over and ended up in a saintly monastery full of beautiful women. Here, he met intellectual and gentle Sister Heidi, petite and aloof Sister Yuta, knowledgeable and gentle Sister Butterfly, and Sister Celine, who had a leader's temperament, maturity, and steadiness. But having cleared the pure love route in the game Which Monastery, he knew very well that each of them was a terrifying monster that devoured people without blinking an eye. So, sit back, relax, and let the stories unfold. Let's embark on this adventure together.
Chapter 1, Sister Heidi. Hawthorne gradually regained consciousness, and as soon as he woke up, he felt a splitting headache, as if he were hungover. Strange, I didn't drink last night, and I went to bed quite early. He painfully opened his eyes, looked around, but the environment he found himself in suddenly cleared his mind, followed by a look of astonishment. Where is this? What catches the eye is a simple, even somewhat monotonous small room, with clean walls and ceilings devoid of any decoration, not even a single light. All the light in the room depended on the warm sunlight shining through the glass window beside him. And now he was lying on the big bed near the window, covered with a yellow wool blanket, which was not only soft but also had a faint fragrance. For a moment, Hawthorne's brow couldn't help but furrow. No, I should be in the dormitory. How did I end up here? With confusion, he lowered his head, lifted the blanket, and prepared to go out and take a look. Soon after, he discovered that he was wearing a light gray cotton pajama and his calves were fair and slender, not like that of an adult. With confusion, he then lifted up a bit of his sleepwear, only to be surprised to find that his body now appeared sickly pale, thin to the point of being skin and bones, much smaller than his impression of himself by more than a star and a half. What's going on? This is not my body. Did I travel through time? A great fear arose in his heart, and Hawthorne quickly rolled out of bed. Under the bed, there lay a pair of small-sized black leather slippers on the wooden floor, next to a wooden bedside table with a glass mirror on it. He put his feet into the shoes and then turned around, looking at the mirror. Then, he just paused for a moment. It turned out to be quite good-looking. Reflected in the mirror is a boy of about 15 or 16 years old, with white hair, blue eyes, and delicate skin. His facial features are exquisite, as if they were carefully carved by God himself. Although there is still a hint of innocence in his facial contours, it does not seem out of place. On the contrary, it can even evoke a sense of maternal instinct in some women. Or animal nature. He couldn't help but reach out and pinch his own facial skin. As he felt the soft touch, he confirmed one thing: he had indeed traveled through time. Fortunately, although his new body was a bit thinner, it was still a good vessel. This should be a good start, right? He was uncertain, and at this moment, accompanied by the sound of a creaking door, a figure pushed open the door from behind and walked into his room. Hawthorne quickly turned around, but immediately his face couldn't help but turn pale. Good, beautiful. Walking in from outside the door was a young nun. She had a face as beautiful as an angel, with big, sapphire blue eyes that resembled two precious gemstones. Long eyelashes hung delicately above them, and her dainty nose and thin but rosy lips emitted a captivating charm. She is about 1.7 meters tall, wearing a traditional, thick black nun's habit, with a silver cross hanging on her chest. However, even so, it cannot hide her magnificent and upright bosom, which attracts Hawthorne's gaze with its full curves. The abstinent attire and this sinful body, with a strong contrast, are impacting his nerves and immediately eliciting a reaction from his body. Damn it, isn't this body too impulsive? Hawthorne cursed silently in his heart. Fortunately, his pajamas were loose enough, so he only needed to bend slightly to conceal his embarrassment. Taking in his reaction, the nun couldn't help but smile. It seems like you're recovering quite well. Saying that, she slowly took a step and walked to the end of the bed, while softly saying, Come over. Hawthorne gazed at her face intently, somehow feeling that the woman in front of him looked somewhat familiar. However, when he tried to recall, his mind suddenly experienced a sharp pain, and instantly, any recollection could no longer continue. Forget it, I'll think about it later. He wanted to move forward as instructed, but his body suddenly took a step back, as if some fearful memory had been engraved in his muscles, causing him to instinctively react. Feeling the instinctive fear in his body, he couldn't help but speculate wildly in his mind. What's going on? Could it be that this seemingly gentle nun sister is actually a very strict and fierce character? Hiss. Let's just get through it by fooling around. Sorry, Miss Nun. I might not be recovering so well. He covered his head and said with some pain, I still have a headache now, and I can't remember a lot of things. Then, he put on a sincere expression and asked her, May I ask who you are? The nun was startled, then suddenly realized, followed by a sorrowful expression in her eyes and a regretful tone. So that's it, you have actually lost your memory. Yes, that's right. This is also something expected after all. Considering that you are still alive, it's already a miracle. The painful expression on the beautiful woman in front of him made Hawthorne unable to bear the heartache. He couldn't help but sigh deep down in his heart. Although he was not sure about the relationship between you and the original owner, since I am here now, I will take his place and live a good life. My name is Heidi, and your name is Nigel Hawthorne. The nun in front of him put away her sad expression and looked at him seriously. Do you still have any impression of these two names? Hawthorne? The original owner of this body is actually surnamed Hawthorne. Sigh. What a coincidence. But it's actually not bad, at least it saves me a lot of effort. Hawthorne secretly rejoiced in his heart, but the name, Heidi, made his brain ache again, feeling familiar yet unable to grasp any clues. It should be the memories of the original owner. Well, this nun seems to be treating me well, so she should be trustworthy. So, he relaxed his nerves and put on a pitiful look, honestly answering, It sounds familiar, but I really can't remember. Sister, is there anything else that can help me remember? Across from him, upon hearing his words, the nun's complexion slightly flushed. She looked at him and bit her lower lip, as if she had made some kind of determination. Such a pure body, it seems there is no harm. It seems that only I can do it. You sit on the bed, don't move, and leave everything to me. Hawthorne was taken aback, thinking to himself, she believed it just like that? Was it really that easy to deceive her? He didn't understand what the original owner of this body had experienced, so he obediently sat on the bed for the time being. Then, he saw the nun slowly walk up to him, gently bowing her head, her forehead touching his brow, and her nose touching his. Relax your body, she whispered, her voice tinged with shyness, and then, follow your desires, with your hands, explore my mysteries. Hawthorne was stunned, although the words were somewhat enigmatic, he understood them. Is this saying that I can put my hand under her nun's habit and then, do whatever I want? This. His heart was pounding, however, his muscles were trembling. A greater fear rose in his heart, causing his body to stiffen, almost unable to move. No, if that's the case, why is this body so afraid? This is definitely a fishing law enforcement, I absolutely cannot be fooled. He stood still in his place, motionless. Seeing him like this, the nun sighed softly after a few seconds. It seems it's still not possible. That's the only option, so let me take it a step further. She muttered to herself like this, her face becoming even more rosy, with the shyness of a young girl. She reached out, from top to bottom, unbuttoning the buttons of his pajamas one by one. Then, she extended her tender and soft hands, gently caressing his chest. Dash. Feeling the delicate touch, Hawthorne's eyes widened instantly. Even though his body swelled almost to the point of explosion, the indescribable fear in his heart made him instinctively retreat back onto the bed. Miss Nun, is this, perhaps not appropriate? He hadn't finished speaking, but the nun suddenly exerted force, catching him off guard, and immediately pushed him down onto the bed. And she followed suit, lying on his bare chest, her face flushed red like blood, her cherry-like mouth exhaling a fragrant breath, softly whispering in his ear, "There's nothing wrong, I just want to make you comfortable." Hawthorne was shocked inexplicably. This. Isn't she a nun? Why would she do such a thing? What is the relationship between the original owner of this body and her, after all? His mind was almost blank, and then he heard the nun whisper, "Your soul is too weak. I cannot use magic on you, so I can only do this with my hands. I haven't tried it before either, so I might not be very skilled. If you feel uncomfortable, please make sure to let me know immediately." She said this, her soft little hand reaching down, quickly gliding over his abdomen, grabbing onto his pajama pants, gently pulling them down. No. Hawthorne instinctively wanted to protect something, but evidently, the body is incredibly honest in the face of reason. The nun blushed and extended her finger, gently flicking it twice. Instantly, Hawthorne felt a deep sense of moral and shame, leaving him utterly embarrassed. In the end, he despairingly covered his eyes, feeling as if he were an ostrich. But escape is useless. Then, the nun's small hand grabbed the weapon and began to move it up and down. A strong electric current surged into his mind, stimulating his scalp to the point of numbness. It felt as if countless little bugs were crawling all over his body. "It seems like we have a good start," the nun whispered softly, seeing his expression, and then her body moved down to explore. Hawthorne parted a gap with his fingers, looked down, and saw her crouching by the bed, gently opening her cherry-like mouth. The next moment, he took a deep breath and all the fear that had filled his body vanished, leaving behind a strong and indescribable sense of relief and joy. At this moment, he was so excited that he even felt like crying. This feeling, this experience. I've never had it before, never. This feeling emerged in his heart, and he no longer had any fear, not even a trace of headache remained, his mind was clear, and there were no more obstacles. His body completely relaxed, enjoying the service of the nun's mouth, feeling her using all her skills, serving him hesitantly but sincerely. The nun suddenly slowly spat it out, lifted her eyes, looked at him with nervousness, shyness, and anticipation, and asked, "Do you feel comfortable?" "Comfortable." Hawthorne responded subconsciously, feeling as if he was just one step away from heaven after the experience he had just had. "You feel comfortable, that's good." The nun blushed and smiled shyly, then slowly got up and knelt on the bed again, looking down at his body. "So now, it's time for me to feel comfortable." In the next moment, her holy face suddenly cracked, revealing a terrifyingly pale complexion. Rows of sharp teeth, as white as hooks, emerged from within. Rapidly growing from the crimson flesh, they transformed into a monstrous and horrifying giant mouth, resembling that of a seven-gilled moray eel. And at the same time, her nun's habit began to rapidly change. In the blink of an eye, it turned into numerous dark green, terrifying tentacles with ugly suckers, wildly swaying in the room. Afterwards, 3 dark green tentacles plunged down simultaneously, burrowing into his ears and mouth. Hawthorne was taken aback. A strong fear accompanied by terrifying memories resurfaced in his mind at this moment. He remembered what he was doing last night and also remembered who this woman in front of him was. He was playing a game called Witch Monastery last night, in which he played a young priest who battles cunning witches disguised as evil spirits that feed on human souls hidden in the monastery. And in front of us is the first witch to be conquered inside, a terrifying presence from the depths of the ocean, who enjoys manipulating people's minds with illusions. When a person reaches the edge of despair, she devours a part of their soul. She is the deep-sea witch, Heidi. I actually crossed over into this game world. Woo-woo dash. He struggled to resist, but then 2 more tentacles came down and bound his hands and feet, rendering him immobile. Buzzing. The tentacles reaching into his ears rubbed against his eardrums, while the one entering his mouth went deep into his esophagus and continued to burrow into his stomach. Then, these tentacles emitted a faint green light and began to devour his soul. Dash. At that moment, Hawthorne felt as if his soul was about to be torn apart. His head was pounding, yet at this very moment, he couldn't even let out a scream. "Help me, Dash. I don't want to die. Who? Come and save me quickly." His heart roared, and just at this moment, a sudden electronic synthesized female voice sounded in his mind. Detection of time traveler phenomenon, system initializing. Host identity recognition in progress. Error, host physical body does not match the soul. Re-identifying based on the soul as the primary criterion. The host's soul is identified as a developer clan, granting the highest level of access. Hello, host. The monastery construction system is at your service. Chapter 2 Monastic System. Heidi retracted all her tentacles, and her cracked face returned to its original form. In the blink of an eye, she transformed from a terrifying, monstrous creature back into the sweet, gentle, understanding nun sister. Compared to just now, she now has a rosy complexion and a look of unparalleled joy and satisfaction, as if she has just tasted a delicious feast and her desires have been fully satisfied. She lowered her head and looked at Hawthorne, who was struggling to breathe under him. With sympathy and reluctance, she held his face gently and said softly, "Rest well, my dear Hawthorne. You are my favorite delicacy, you can't just die so easily." Hawthorne's eyes were dull and lifeless as he stared at the ceiling of the room, as if he had lost his soul. Heidi, however, was already very familiar with this and paid no attention. She stepped back onto the floor, maintaining a devout and elegant posture, and slowly walked out of the room, closing the door behind her. Hawthorne, on the other hand, still lay in bed, motionless, as if he were really dead. Time passes by minute. The sun outside the window gradually shifts to the south, until some scorching sunlight shines on his face and eyes. He blinks twice and turns over in immense pain. Then, his body curled up like a lobster, convulsing, hands covering his head, breathing heavily, heart beating tiredly, and a thin layer of sweat forming on his forehead. It hurts. So scary. Is this the soul-sucking witch? That kind of pain, as if the brain was being torn apart from the middle. There was a moment when he truly thought he was going to die. This kind of thing. I definitely already have psychological trauma. I'm afraid I won't be able to be strong again in the future. His body trembled slightly, and after a long time, the pain of his soul being drained finally subsided. He weakly lay on the extremely messy bed, looking at the ceiling of the room, his eyes filled with confusion about the future. Damn it, being stuck here, no matter how I look at it, the future is all uncertain. According to the game setting, before being tamed by players, the witches in this monastery have been consuming the souls of hundreds of civilians every year. Because they specifically target orphans and vagabonds, the city's public security is extremely poor, and thus they have never been discovered. So, I suppose that the original owner of this body, myself, was just a poor soul targeted by a witch, and then, as early as yesterday, had already been drained of their soul and died, right? Will I also be this ending? No, we have to give it a try somehow. Run away. It is highly unlikely, not to mention that my new body is quite weak. Even the protective magic circle set up by the witches in the monastery is something that I, a complete novice in magic, cannot handle. Stepping back 10,000 steps, even if one manages to escape by chance, how can they continue to survive in this unfamiliar and dangerous city, where there are no relatives or friends, and where the mafia rules and the public security is extremely poor? And as for imitating the protagonist of the original work, putting them to sleep one by one? That's even more impossible. I am not some blessed being with divine order, capable of forcefully having sexual intercourse with a witch on the bed, like the chosen one of the gods of heaven in the divine order of the mountain. He suddenly looked stunned. At this very moment, before his eyes, some blue threads slowly appeared, gradually forming a huge blue screen. At the top center of the screen, there is a line of large characters in the Simsun GB 2312 font, which reads, Monastery Construction System. Below it, there are two main sections, namely, Personal Attributes and Monastery Status. And in the bottom right corner of the screen, it says, Purification Points, 0. This panel, apart from missing the daily gift pack and changing gold coins to purification points, is almost identical to the status panel of the game, which monastery, that he played. Seeing this, Hawthorne was suddenly stunned, and his brain throbbed with pain. But along with this wave of pain, some memories gradually surfaced in his mind. Oh, right. When that witch was sucking my soul just now, I did hear the sound of the system starting up. It seems that every time my soul is consumed, I lose a portion of my memory. No matter how hard I try to recall, it cannot be recovered. Sigh. He couldn't help but feel a wave of fear, But then, as he looked at the blue screen in front of him, his heart couldn't stop racing. I seem to have a more powerful cheat than the protagonist of the original work. System. He shouted in a low voice, a series of questions blurted out. System. What is your origin? What can you do? Do you have intelligence? Can you have a conversation? The system has no response, as if this guy only carries a voice message, and the rest can only rely on the user to explore on their own. Fortunately, this user interface is relatively user-friendly and doesn't seem difficult to use. With this thought in mind, he first clicked on the first, Personal Attributes, panel, and then a new interface appeared, with a scroll bar on the right side of the screen. One by one, the data was displayed in front of him. Host, Hawthorne. Gender, male. Race, human subspecies. Age, 15 years old. Height, 1.69 meters. Weight, 49.7 kilograms. Strength, 8. Agile, 9. Physical condition, 7. Intelligence, 13. Perception, 12. Charm, 20. Hawthorne was suddenly startled. No, am I so charming? No, is it that this child's charm is so high? No, it's not right. Now the soul has changed to mine, so it should be my charm. Countless thoughts flew through his mind for a moment, and then he noticed that next to each attribute, there was a small plus sign and a question mark respectively. He extended his finger and tapped on the question mark. Then, a line of explanatory small text appeared in front of him. Charm attribute represents the sum of a person's appearance, leadership ability, and natural attraction to supernatural magical energy. The charm of an ordinary human is 10 or 11, exceeding this value can be considered as a natural talent, while the charm of a normal human will not exceed 20. High charisma not only attracts creatures of the same race, but also different races, elemental beings, and even gods and demons. Hawthorne suddenly realized that it seemed the original owner of this body met such a tragic end because their charm was too high and attracted a witch. After all, according to the game's setting, Heidi is the witch of the deep sea who was born after being contaminated by the evil power of the deep sea origin. After understanding the meaning of charm, he looked at his various attributes and tentatively clicked on one of the plus signs. Immediately, a dialog box pops up on the screen with 6 big characters. Insufficient purification points. Okay, it seems that this purification point is the only currency used in this system. But how can I obtain this thing? He tapped on the 4 characters, purification points, in the bottom right corner, but there was no response. Helplessly, he had to hold down the scroll wheel on the right side of the screen and slowly scroll down. And so, the new attribute entry appeared before him. Occupation, none. Professional ability, purification. Specialty, none. Spell, none. Oh, it looks like this is it. He then clicked on the small question mark next to purify, and a line of text annotation appeared in front of him. Host's core ability, capable of purifying the bodies and souls of malevolent creatures, enslaving them as their own soul servants, and gaining purification points. Activation condition, mentally recite, purify, and maintain physical contact with the target. Okay, it seems that there are some differences between the gameplay of this system and the game. He then clicked on the second major section, and with the page switch, what came into view was the familiar in-game building panel, a level 1 monastery, occupying an area of 2,200 square meters, requiring an area of 10,000 square meters to upgrade, and costing 1,000 purification points. Currently, it is possible to construct a kitchen, dormitory, warehouse, prayer room, etc. After reaching level 2, it will be possible to construct a tailoring room, trading station, and altar. Familiar panels and terms stimulate his memory, and his mood becomes somewhat excited. In his mind, he begins to recall last night when he put a lot of effort into summarizing the best upgrade route to achieve a pure love clearance. Don't invest in any level 1 buildings, immediately start fundraising and extortion at the beginning, then solo the goblin cave in the rubble area to save money and directly upgrade to level 2 monastery, and unlock the trading post and tailor shop. Wait, that's not right. Hawthorne pinched himself hard, took 2 deep breaths, and forced himself to calm down. It's still a long way from good times, and it's hard to say whether I can get through this difficult situation myself. The most important thing now is to purify Heidi and make her my servant. Although there is a cheat, this thing cannot currently provide any power for oneself. I am still weak now, so I must have a plan. To catch someone off guard, first make Heidi relax her guard, and then suddenly unleash the purification. Then, it is best to maintain a posture in which she is not easily able to move or cast spells. The components of a spell are generally gestures and language, the former requiring a set of hand movements, while the latter requires the ability to speak. If either of these cannot be done, the spell cannot be cast. So, during the raid, it's best to be holding her hand or in the middle of kissing her. So to meet these 2 conditions, it's best to deceive Heidi in oneself. It definitely won't work if I bite myself. In case she reacts and actually bites me, it would not be worth it. It would be best to kiss while holding hands. So, what kind of excuse should I find to kiss her? He pondered and contemplated, scrutinizing the feasibility of various plans, the credibility of various reasons, and the multitude of details to be considered when actually implementing them, and so on and so forth. Sigh. Damn it, in my past life, I didn't have any experience seducing such terrifying women. The sun continues to move south, and the sunlight gradually reaches its strongest point at noon. Rubbing his temples, his brain feels a bit sore, and he feels like his mind is not quite enough. And just at this moment, the door to the room was pushed open again. Hawthorne jumped up from the bed in a startle, turned his head, and saw Heidi standing at the door, holding a basket in her hand. Seeing that he could still sit up, this evil witch from the deep sea, disguised as a nun, immediately revealed a warm smile. Great, it seems like you're recovering well. After a pause, she continued softly, are you hungry? I made your favorite carrot bread and fresh shrimp and wild vegetable soup. Eat it while it's hot. Hawthorne's heart was pounding, and his plan was not fully prepared yet. But he forced himself, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth, nodding gently as if he were extremely obedient and clever. Chapter 3, The Subjugation of Demons with the Diamond Pestle. Heidi then sat at the bedside and placed the basket on the nightstand, saying, you are too weak, so don't move. Let me feed you. Speaking, she lifted the lid, and a strong aroma wafted out. Inside was a flat round bowl filled with a bowlful of vegetable broth floating with fresh shrimp, with 3 slices of golden brown bread placed next to the soup bowl, emitting a fragrant smell and hot steam. The enticing aroma stimulated Hawthorne's sense of smell, and instantly his stomach churned, a feeling of hunger rising in his heart. It was then that he realized he hadn't eaten anything for a long time. Sigh, let's eat first and then purify her. Heidi then reached out and picked up a piece of bread, dipped it in the soup, and brought it to Hawthorne's mouth. The latter obediently opened his mouth, took a bite, and savored the taste inside. Hiss, why is there a hint of salty taste like seawater? The strange smell made him furrow his brows slightly, and then he realized that although the game background was based on the late 19th century, it had skipped the steam engine due to the influence of magic and directly used electricity, with crude electric lights and trams. However, with the current level of technology in this world, refined table salt is still not available, or rather, it is available but at a high cost that the lower class cannot afford. Moreover, being a port city, it is not surprising that the food here generally has a slightly salty taste of the sea. Fortunately, I can still endure it. He thought this way, furrowing his brow, and started chewing. Seeing his expression, Heidi's face showed some panic and disappointment. Is it not tasty? I'm sorry, I haven't mastered the preparation of this kind of food yet. Looking at her genuine expression without any falsehood, Hawthorne couldn't help but sigh. If only you were truly a nun, you wouldn't have to consume my soul. That would be so much better. No, it's delicious, he whispered. I'm just a bit weak, so I'm a little tired. Upon hearing this, Heidi's eyes instantly lit up, as if spring had arrived and flowers were blooming. It's wonderful that you can like it, my dear Hawthorne. Saying this, her eyes shimmered, and then her face gradually turned rosy. However, since you are still a bit weak, then. She bit her lower lip, as if making a decision, took a deep breath, dipped the bread into the soup again, but instead of giving it to him, she put it in her own mouth. At this moment, her face has turned as red as blood, but her actions did not stop. In the bewildered gaze of Hawthorne, she suddenly stood up, closed her eyes, and kissed his lips. Hawthorne's eyes suddenly widened, and the warm and soft touch that came from his lips even caused his body to react instantly. Not only that, he could also feel that Heidi's lilac tongue was actively reaching into his mouth, and even entwining with his own tongue. This witch. Has she always been this proactive? Wow, the original plan didn't work out, and the witch herself came forward. His body was trembling, as if driven by instinct. His hands climbed up Heidi's nun's habit, beginning to explore its entrance haphazardly, yearning for a more intimate contact. Noticing his actions, Heidi's face became even more flushed, but she did not resist. Instead, she grabbed his hand and guided him, lifting her own skirt and allowing him to explore from beneath her robe. And when he touched her delicate and soft skin, Hawthorne suddenly realized that underneath the seemingly dark, conservative, and thick nun's habit, it was actually empty. Heidi, she's not wearing anything inside. Upon this discovery, it instantly heightened his desire, causing his body to swell almost to the point of bursting. This witch still has a rosy complexion, shy and innocent like a young girl, closing her eyes, enjoying his wet kisses and caresses. But thinking of her ferocious nature, and this hard-won opportunity, Hawthorne immediately made up his mind and silently muttered in his heart, "Purify." In the next moment, a milky white light emerged from his body, then followed his lips and hands, attaching to Heidi's body. A powerful and pure force suddenly emanated from his lips and arms, instantly filling his body, dispelling his hunger, fatigue, drowsiness, and headache. Every muscle in his body became excited and active, just like an athlete who had just finished warming up. Wow, is this purification? This is clearly robbing her of her power, isn't it? In front of him, Heidi's eyes suddenly opened wide, her lips separated from his, her expression twisted, looking extremely painful. She opened her mouth, emitting a deep roar from her throat, and countless curved sharp teeth in her mouth resembled the most terrifying meat grinder. Her originally beautiful face also began to distort, with dark and ominous tentacles growing out of her face, exuding an eerie and gloomy aura. A dim light emerged from her body, and the thick nun's hat swayed as if countless tentacles were wriggling inside, about to surge up and tear Hawthorne to pieces. But then, those pitch-black tentacles quickly retreated, and her tone became extremely terrified. What's going on? I can't. She wanted to step back, and seeing this, Hawthorne quickly moved his hands to her back, too busy to savor the smooth and slippery touch, and embraced her. Then he exerted his whole body strength. So light. However, without being distracted, why is the body as light as a feather underwater? With just one turn, he pressed this witch onto the bed. And this action immediately exposed his intentions. Heidi's eyes widened instantly, and her gaze towards him was filled with shock. It's actually you? You betrayed me. She never expected that this weak human, whom she regarded as food and had been continuously absorbing soul power from for over 10 days, would suddenly possess a power that could threaten her life. You, despicable human. With an angry curse, her beautiful face twisted into a grimace of anger and hatred. Her usual gentleness and elegance were nothing more than a disguise she used to relax her prey and make their souls more delicious. But when her own life was threatened, her evil nature was instantly revealed. Without any language or gestures, the terrifying magic surges and roars. The real world is not a game, there is no need to consider balance and challenge. This powerful witch from the deep sea doesn't even need to learn any exquisite spellcasting, super magical expertise. She can unleash spells without any words or gestures. Underneath her, the pitch-black shadow began to expand, with dark green tentacles attempting to reach out. However, every time she tried, milky white dots suddenly covered them, purifying them completely. You actually found yourself unable to exert any power. Heidi became even more furious. I will torment you for eternity, make you wish for death, but unable to die. She began to struggle with her limbs, Hawthorne's heart pounding, beads of sweat continuously forming on his forehead, feeling like things were on the verge of losing control. No, she must be suppressed. But I don't have that kind of strength myself. Peng. Suddenly, seizing a gap, Heidi exerted force and swiftly flipped over, pressing him down beneath her. Then, she grabbed his neck with both hands and said, "Go die, you despicable creature." Even if she cannot cast spells, with her powerful physical strength, she is not someone that ordinary mortals can provoke. Although this power is now almost non-existent, it is still enough to suppress Hawthorne's weak body. Hawthorne couldn't breathe, and even started rolling his eyes. He tried to struggle, but his strength was so weak compared to the witches, and all his resistance seemed so futile. Damn, this guy still has such strong power. No wonder it's Heidi, the purification hasn't ended after such a long time. Damn it, the data in the game is still too low. In the game, game. At this critical moment of life and death, a sudden thought flashed through his mind. In the game, Heidi's characteristics. As the first witch to be tamed by players, Heidi is characterized by her strong power but extremely high sensitivity. Even a slight touch can make her go weak in the knees, and a few times at bat is all it takes to conquer her. Although I don't know how things are in the real world, for now, there is no other way. Coincidentally, his hands are now inside her nun's robe, and this witch is not wearing underwear. His hands then slide down her body, caressing her flat and soft belly, her round and full buttocks, and exploring her plump and delicate thighs. The hands that were gripping his neck suddenly loosened, and Heidi's whole body suddenly went limp. There was already hatred in her eyes, but her body couldn't help but lose strength. Really effective. Hawthorne seized the opportunity and with a twist, he pinned the witch back down beneath him. Regaining control, his hand did not stop, his middle finger traced along the moistness, then slowly delved in. You filthy crawler, how dare you use your, Heidi's mouth suddenly emitted a seductive moan, her snowy white thighs instinctively tightened, and then Hawthorne felt a powerful pressure coming from all directions, ruthlessly oppressing and tormenting his poor middle finger. The reaction is very intense. That means I did it right. But what should I do next? How do you activate the cheat code? Countless instructional videos flashed through Hawthorne's mind as he awkwardly began moving his fingers. Suddenly, Heidi's waist slightly arched, her expression contorted, and the emotions within her screams became even more complex. No. Suddenly, he felt a surge of energy rushing through his fingertips like a tidal wave. Then, this fierce and terrifying witch's body stiffened, followed by her lifeless eyes, slowly becoming limp on the bed. It seems, it was successful. His heart was surging, his breath heavy. Just as he let out a sigh of relief, he looked at Heidi's misty eyes, flushed cheeks, and faint gasps, and felt a fierce fire burning inside him too. Then why not? With this thought in mind, he then extended his other hand and took off his own pajama pants, revealing a menacing object that had long been pointed angrily at the sky, bouncing in front of Heidi's eyes. However, this witch who has killed countless people, at this moment, is as weak as a thread of air, even cursing with such feeble anger. You lowly creature, I will never allow you to defile my noble body. However, it was too late. The white purifying light climbed up her body, and now she couldn't even transform back to her original form, let alone use her powers. So, Hawthorne lifted the hem of her nun's habit from below, and immediately, Heidi's delicate and flawless perfect body was exposed in his eyes. He could no longer bear it, he pounced, gripping one side with his left hand, feeling the astonishing softness and elasticity, while his lips held the bud on the other end. Suddenly, the already sensitive Heidi was made even more sweaty by his series of actions. She weakly pushed his shoulders, panting and never stopping, while angrily cursing, "Get away, you disgusting creature, don't touch me. No, don't, move away, go away, just get lost." Perhaps for the first time in her life, there was a hint of fear in her voice. Because she felt something slowly pressing forward, pushing aside, and probing inward there. Hawthorne's waist suddenly exerted force. Heidi suddenly widened her eyes, realizing what had happened, and felt the whole world shatter. Tears of humiliation rolled down the corners of her eyes. Chapter 4: The Purified Witch. No need for further instruction. What Hawthorne is doing next is his natural instinct for life. Every inch of his body was trembling uncontrollably, completely immersed in this wild celebration of life. He pressed down on Heidi's delicate and flawless body from top to bottom, completely disregarding her angry curses and sobbing, only focused on continuously sprinting again. However, when the purified white light completely enveloped the body of this witch, her merciless insults gradually turned into pleasant moans. Her arms wrapped around his neck, and her supple waist began to sway actively, matching Hawthorne's movements. Finally, they both reached the peak of pleasure together in his first eruption. Maintaining the intimate position they had just been in, the two embraced each other and fell into a deep sleep. However, Hawthorne fell asleep, but the system's work did not stop. A milky white light continued to pass between the two, and some of the original owner's soul power slowly returned to his body, replenishing his somewhat weakened soul. In his slumber, he felt like he had a very long dream. In the dream, he was born into a regular family in the eastern port area of Libro Harbor. His father was a soldier in the navy of the Northern Sane Empire who had come to this colony, and after retiring, he chose to stay here and became a city guard. His mother, on the other hand, was a local native who made a living by doing laundry. His parents died in a monster attack. Both parents are followers of the goddess of life and have some wealth, so young Hawthorne was able to attend school and had good grades. Although the family is not wealthy and the parents constantly argue, they manage to get by. But later, times changed. Due to various reasons, the security force in Port Labelle reduced its scale and only took care of the safety in the wealthy residential areas. As a result, my father lost his stable job and income, and had to become a freelancer. He himself also became more irritable, easily angered, and unreasonable. The mother was pregnant with his sister at that time, but she was burdened with depression and fell ill after giving birth to the girl. She eventually passed away 4 years later. The mother's death made the father lose control even more. He started drinking and gambling, frequently beating and scolding Hawthorne, and even refused to continue supporting his education. Young Hawthorne once tried to continue seeking an opportunity to study by scavenging, but the tuition fee was still beyond his means. He eventually had to drop out of school, and when he returned home in a state of despair, he received even more devastating news. In order to repay his gambling debts, his father had sold his young sister to human traffickers. So he angrily argued with his father and even attempted to assassinate the veteran. After failing, he chose to flee from the East Harbor district, but with his abilities, he couldn't get far. In the end, he could only escape to the even poorer and more chaotic South Harbor district, barely surviving by scavenging, living in a daze, and without any hope. And on a certain day, he, with a rumbling stomach, heard that there were nuns in this monastery who were giving porridge to the poor, so he came to beg for it. However, little did he know that this was actually a bait for the witches to find food. That night, he was captured by Heidi in the monastery, and she used illusions to arouse his desires, and then consumed his soul. So miserable. The dream of the original Nigel Hawthorne's short and painful life is over. Hawthorne, who was sleeping, gradually woke up and slowly opened his eyes, followed by a soft sigh. Fate's arrangements for everyone are truly unfair, and all one can do is hold on to the chips in their hands and live well. With this thought in mind, he then slightly turned his head and looked out the window. At this moment, it was already evening, and a dark red, enormous sun hung on the edge of the western horizon, striving to bring the earth its last bit of warmth and light. And by the light of this last ray, he also saw the mess on his bed. Heidi's naked body was entwined with his, her proud, snow-white peaks pressed against his chest, giving him a soft and elastic sensation that instantly made his body surge with energy and blood. My own mental and physical state seems to be very good now. Yes, full of energy, physically fit, feeling that my state has never been this good before. His hands couldn't help but wander, knead, and enjoy the exquisite touch on Heidi's body. And as he caressed her, the sleeping witch furrowed her brows slightly, opened her bewildered eyes, obviously disturbed by his actions. As soon as she recognized him, the look in this girl's eyes instantly filled with endless tenderness. Her delicate throat slightly opened, and her voice was full of admiration and attachment. "Master." Speaking, she unexpectedly reached out her arms and embraced his body, looking extremely satisfied. Hawthorne's movements stiffened for a moment. He wondered how the witch would react when she woke up. Would she fly into a rage? Would she burst into tears? Would she be helpless? He originally thought anything was possible, but he never expected Heidi to have such an appearance, completely filling him with affection, and even taking the initiative to approach him and call him "Master." "This, Heidi." He grabbed the witch's hand, feeling anxious and uneasy, and asked softly, "Do you not hate me?" Heidi looked up at him, blinked her big, watery blue eyes, and asked with confusion in her voice, "Why would the master think that I hate him?" Hawthorne was somewhat incoherent, her angry expression still vivid in my mind. "Because, after all, have you lost your power and freedom now?" Heidi smiled, then hugged him, resting her head on his chest, squinting her eyes, and softly said, "I haven't lost my strength, master. As for the so-called freedom, well, I now feel fulfilled and secure, no longer experiencing the emptiness, hollowness, and confusion I once had. I have never had such a genuine experience of happiness before, something that the old me could never have imagined. Today should be forever engraved in my memory, as it is the most significant turning point in my destiny." She whispered softly, expressing her true feelings, and Hawthorne suddenly realized it, unable to help but sigh. "So that's it. This is the witch's flaw, right? Witches are not normal, complete beings of the material world. In a sense, they are more like demonic creatures from the bottomless abyss. They are born from the chaotic energy outside the world, and then they combine with various magical or natural phenomena of the material world, eventually becoming what they are now. They thus possess a terrifying and grotesque form, as well as ever-changing magical abilities. However, they also crave the emotions of normal people, such as joy, anger, sorrow, and happiness, which they themselves cannot generate. This is why they are so keen on manipulating and tormenting humans, ultimately devouring their souls. And now, after being purified by herself, it seems that Heidi's flaw has been filled by herself, and she has even become her most loyal follower. At this thought, Hawthorne couldn't help but feel excited. You see, compared to other witches, Heidi's method of consuming human souls, although extremely evil and cruel, could even be considered kind. If their purification ability can make them change their evil ways and return to righteousness, it would be a great achievement for this world. Thinking like this, he became more and more excited. Then he lowered his head, looked at Heidi's affectionate eyes, her rosy lips, her naked and snow-white delicate body, and her towering and full breasts. Finally, unable to resist the surging desire inside him, he reached out and grabbed her again. A seductive moan escaped Heidi's throat, but she offered no resistance. Like a swan, she lifted her snowy white neck and willingly brought her moist lips to Hawthorne's, yearning for his kiss. And Hawthorne wasted no time, immediately lowering his head and kissing her soft, warm lips, feeling her daring yet shy lilac tongue timidly exploring, eagerly wanting to entwine with his. "Heidi, are you still inside?" Suddenly, outside, a cold and clear female voice resounded, instantly interrupting the passionate embrace of the man and woman inside. And at this moment, Hawthorne, who had already regained his memory, instantly recognized the identity of the owner of that voice. Blade Witch, Yuta. Chapter 5, Yuta's Killing Intent. Blade Witch, the second strongest among the 7 witches in the monastery, enjoys attacking people when they least expect it, killing them, and savoring the subtle emotional fluctuations of their bewildered state of, "Oh, I'm already dead." It can be considered quite extravagant. And this wasteful eating habit naturally cannot satisfy her enormous appetite. As a result, her hands are stained with blood, and the number of people she has killed is more than the combined total of the other 6 nuns. And at this moment, the powerful and cruel nun stands outside the room, asking about Heidi's condition in a calm yet somewhat perplexed tone. Hawthorne suddenly became nervous, and Heidi also instantly restrained all her desires and quickly replied, "Ah, yes. I'm eating, don't come in." As she said this, she quickly got out of bed and clumsily put on the large nun's robe on herself, while also covering Hawthorne with a blanket, making sure he was lying down properly. Creak. Obviously, Yuta did not listen to Heidi's advice. She pushed the door open and walked straight into the room. Hawthorne instinctively turned his head and looked towards the door, and for the first time in the real world, he saw the appearance of this witch. Compared to the nearly 1.7 meter tall and well-proportioned Heidi, Yuta is even smaller and thinner. She is probably less than 1.6 meters tall, and her black nun's habit is also very slim-fitting. Her chest curves are not very prominent, giving her an overall appearance of being petite and cute, or rather, refined and elegant. Her delicate face showed no trace of extra expression. Her purple eyes were filled with a chilling feeling. Despite her nun's attire, she emitted a dangerous aura that made people instinctively want to stay away. And it allows some audacious individuals to constantly emerge, wanting to defile her, making her icy expression become both humiliated and confused. Compared to Hawthorne's boldness, Heidi seemed startled and quickly turned around, squeezing out a reluctant, complaining expression to Yuta, saying, "Why did you suddenly come in? I told you, I was eating." She tried to pass it off with these words, however, Yuta ignored her and suddenly sniffed, then his handsome eyebrows furrowed tightly. Such a strong smell. Men's, women's, here, there, and on Heidi's body. But the most intense place is still on the man's body in bed, that intense, strong, and uniquely male sexual desire. And on his bed, mixed with Heidi's body, was the wonderful scent of the source power that should have belonged exclusively to the witch and should not have been shared with any other creature. They did that thing fiercely on this bed. At this thought, Yuta's chest suddenly heaved violently. A strong anger surged in her heart, and her purple eyes looked at Heidi in disbelief. "You actually..." Heidi's heart was also pounding, but at this moment she could only put on a tough front and say, "What's wrong with me? What do you want to do?" Hawthorne also secretly glanced at Yuta, feeling anxious. But then, he saw the blade witch suddenly turn her head and look at him. He was caught off guard, facing her pair of gem-like purple-red eyes, and immediately felt a sharp pain as if his eyes were being pricked by needles. Subconsciously, he closed his eyes and tears streamed down. Tears streamed down his face as he couldn't help but exclaim in astonishment. Is this the power of the second-ranked witch in the monastery? Just by locking eyes with her for a moment, he almost got blinded by her gaze. It's outrageous. It seems that as an ordinary person now, there is simply no other way to deal with these witches except to be cautious, very cautious. He was secretly vigilant in his heart, and at the door, Yuta's anger was like adding fuel to the fire because of his recent small action. Dirty and despicable humans, only worthy of being the lowly beings that provide souls for us witches to feed on. Now not only have you obtained a witch's body, but you also dare to audaciously spy on me. It is an unforgivable sin, and must be torn into 1,000 pieces. Heidi, she exclaimed, her voice filled with sternness that brooked no interruption, you actually did such a thing with him. This is a grave violation of the rules and discipline. The entire monastery will be ashamed because of your actions. She scolded, even though Hawthorne was already a dead man in her eyes at this moment, she still remained cautious, speaking only of the strict rules and regulations of the convent, never mentioning anything about witches. This is their tacit understanding, to avoid any moment where a careless action would reveal their true intentions and give outsiders a handle to exploit. And in response to this, Heidi raised an eyebrow slightly. He is my beloved possession. How to enjoy his body and mind is entirely my choice. It seems that it's not your place to meddle. Yuta's eyes widened instantly. You. She really didn't expect that this woman, who used to be crazy, would now disregard her pride as a witch and be willing to mate with a human. And Heidi straightened her towering chest. Even though she was not as strong as the other party, her height and figure were far superior to Yuta. At this moment, she unexpectedly gained the upper hand in momentum. This is my freedom, Yuta. Please do not interfere with my preferences. Hawthorne listened silently, his heart pounding. However, at this moment, he, who was weak in strength, really had no way. He could never, solely relying on such a weak body and without knowing any magic, suddenly crossed this 7 to 8 meters distance, rush to her side before Yuta reacted, and then purify her or something. So, he could only tremble in fear. And finally, even though she was more powerful than Heidi, she didn't want to conflict with another powerful witch over such a trivial matter. So, Yuta took a step back and sighed. Well, I didn't actually mean to blame you. It's just that, with your arrogance, it's a bit hard to understand why you would do something like this. Heidi sneered, but she felt relieved in her heart, thinking to herself that at least she had managed to bluff her way through. Hawthorne also breathed a sigh of relief. However, Yuta's demands had not stopped. But I remember, you have been toying with him for quite some time. His soul is already weakened, so how about you hand him over to me for handling? Hawthorne's heart instantly rose to his throat. She wants me. This request is not actually surprising among witches, especially when Yuta makes such a request. Most witches prefer healthier souls, so a soul like Hawthorne's, which has been drained for 7 or 8 days and is very weak, is considered very dull by the witches. And what Yuta likes is the kind of confusion that occurs right before someone dies abruptly, regardless of whether their soul is weakened or not. Therefore, the witches like to give Yuta people who have only a small remnant of their soul left after being eaten, so that she can kill them. This way, she can reduce the hunting in the slums and avoid attracting suspicion from outsiders due to excessive deaths. So, this is a very reasonable request among the witches, and in response to this, Heidi can only refuse forcefully. No, I haven't had enough fun yet. But she also knew that this reason was completely insufficient, so before Yuta could speak again, she quickly spoke up first, turning the tables. Yuta, have you been very thirsty lately? Or are you too afraid to go out hunting? How come you're coming to me to ask for something when I haven't even had enough fun with my pets? Suddenly, Yuta's eyebrows raised in disbelief. How is that possible? I just had a feeling that this person has been manipulated by you for 7 or 8 days, and it's time to deal with it, so, She spoke, turned her head, and looked closely at Hawthorne on the bed. But at this moment, when she concentrated and focused, she was surprised to find that Hawthorne's soul was vibrant and healthy, not at all like someone on the verge of death. Indeed, killing him now would be a waste and a pity. Alright then. She finally took another step back, no longer entangling herself with Heidi over such trivial matters. I hope you can exercise restraint and not commit any more taboos that nuns should not commit because of this one human. Heidi chuckled lightly. I know, I don't need you to remind me. Yuta no longer said anything, turned around, closed the door, and quietly went away. Afterwards, in the room, whether it was Hawthorne or Heidi, at this moment, they couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. I managed to get away with it.